Welcome aboard the USS Aeronome. To become a member of our crew, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. As a patron of Perfect Organism, you'll receive exclusive perks and early access to content. Incoming audio transmission received. Please proceed to Subdeck 3 to begin playback. Thank you, and welcome aboard.
I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.
Brett and I, we think we deserve full shares, right,
Right.
baby?
You see, Mr. Park and I feel that the bonus situation is never.
Move! Get out of there!
Don't you move! Don't! Move down! Move down! Get out!
Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I am your host, Jamie, and I'm joined by...
Patrick, why didn't you say your last name? You're throwing me off.
Well, I thought we weren't doing that.
Okay.
I'm not going to start again. We're going to keep this.
No, we're keeping it. We're keeping it.
Trader.
I'm Patrick, quote-unquote, Green.
And we're joined by some special guests, a recurring guest, Dave Gogol. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Emphasis on special.
And Michael, how do you say your last name? I don't know if I'm saying your last name right.
Scudieri.
Gary, okay, I'm saying right. You never know.
It's an Scudieri.
Scudieri.
And we are here tonight to talk about some controversial things. And this episode is based off a post that Patrick made called "What's Your Unpopular Alien Saga Opinion?" And it's probably one of our most popular posts that's been made in our group Building Better Worlds in a long time. It was really great fun. Everyone had a lot of fun. Everyone was respectful and responded with their own ideas. And we're going to go through some of those, probably at least 4 to 6, hopefully maybe more tonight, and talk about some opinions that people had that we might disagree with or agree with. Because I think we should agree with some and then certainly discuss the ones we disagree with. And yeah, so thanks guys, Michael and Dave, for being on. Hopefully you guys can be on more. And, yeah.
And before we get going...
Why'd you make that post, Patrick?
Yeah, well, I was going to give you a little bit of context for this post, okay? But also, Michael, I'm going to toss it off to you after this to talk about your background with Alien for people who don't know you yet. So you're on deck for that. But before I get to that, this post, I made this on the way to work last week, and I had this thought in my head. I was like, this is something that I talk about with friends in person. What the fuck was that, Jamie? Was that a jet plane?
That was not me.
That wasn't
Dave Gogol.
Dave, are you at the airport?
Of course I'm at the airport. I'm fly.
Oh my god.
Oh
my god.
That was gold, Dave.
If this guy has kids, the dad jokes are going to be through the fucking roof.
No one's dumb enough to have kids with me. Come on.
So I was on the way to work last week and I was thinking, what are some things that I used to enjoy talking about online that since then I can only talk about really with friends? Like, for example, when Jamie and I text all the time, we can say things like this and make fun of each other and have fun doing it because we really, we respect each other and we kind of assume the best about each other's opinions and we have fun unpacking them. And I was like, I feel like last year even, this would not have been a possible conversation because everybody was very kind of at each other's throats. There was all this infighting about things. But I'm like, you know what? We've been through a shitload this last year, okay? Our studio is disintegrated into Disney at this point. We have no idea if there's a movie coming. We have all of these weird, can I just say, fucking bad Dark Horse miniseries that have been coming out. I'm like, what is going on with this shit? We have this RPG that feels like it's still 12 years away, even though I guess it's only 3 months away at this point. My point being, we're kind of in a weird place as a fandom. We've been through a lot, but a lot of the time, in my experience, when you've been through trauma, at least kind of light, low-grade trauma like this with people that you care about, you can laugh a lot about it. So I was thinking, I bet we're in a place now where I could say, what's your unpopular opinion? And people would have just a great time and be totally honest and totally open and tease each other and have fun. And not let it devolve into a flame war. And I have to say, it was great. Everybody was super chill. Dave is flying to another state as we speak. Everybody was super chill. Everybody was having fun, and I was just reading this thing, fucking crying, laughing. This thread was so funny, and I just want to say, first off, thank you to everybody who participated in this, and everybody who shows up in Building Better Worlds all the time, because you are brilliant and very, very funny. And also, I just want to thank everybody for being so chill and so civil, and I hope we can recapture some of that tonight. And I also want to exhort you guys and myself to take unpopular opinions and try to defend them as well. Because one of the great things about hearing about people's unpopular opinions is we get to uncover, aspects of things that we might have overlooked because we had an opinion about it in the past. Before we get into that, Michael Scudieri, you have been on the show before in a spotlight based on your creative work, but it's been a while since it happened, and you haven't been on as a guest since. So can you give us a little bit of your background for people who might not know you, how you came to the show, and how you were introduced to Alien?
Okay. Alien I've known since before I could talk. I had those kind of parents. Totally cool. My parents recently told me that I used to sit real close to the screen and I'd be sucking my thumb and smiling watching Kane die. So the factor was
sociopath.
Early on.
Yeah, that's fucking weird. That's
you
weird.
You probably
I'm
drink
sorry.
black coffee too, don't you?
Do you not drink black coffee? Is that weird?
Come over my place and find out.
Oh! But don't tell the police where you are.
Sociopaths drink black coffee, right, Dave?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Dave is at 32,000 feet right now. He cannot respond to this, Jamie.
I represent that statement.
Perfect. My family are all artists, so and my dad was a huge fan of Metal Hurlant, Mobius, and all that, and he's a pretty unbelievable artist himself. So I had all that, and he was into Alien, and the artistry of Alien is probably the thing that has kept me going on it and everything. Plus, it's such a masterclass in suspense and tension and building tension and all that. I think that's for some reason the thing that probably attracts me to it the most is just the tension that's built up in the mystery and the tension. So I don't know. It seems to have an endless supply of both when you watch the original and you just cut everything else out. So.
And you want to give people a little heads up where they can check out your work because it is fucking cool and it is worth checking out.
Oh, thanks. It's just michaelscuderi.com. So, the last name is Scudieri. So it's michaelscuderi.com, and that'll link out to Instagram and all that stuff. So, yeah, and it'll have all the stuff from Ash and everything like that. The first issue is very, very near complete. I have 2 pages left, and then I'm just going to spring it on everyone very soon.
Nice.
So,
very nice. Very nice.
It's going to be good.
And for the record, Dave Gogol runs and is the founder of xenomorphing.com, and the Facebook page as well. Everyone who's in the community kind of knows about it. He's been sort of a part of the Perfect Organism family for, I would say, a good 3 years at least, right, Dave?
It's been 3 years already. Shit, yeah.
Yeah.
That went by fast.
Went by really fast. Crazy. So should we get into this, folks?
Let's do it.
Let's fucking do it.
Let's do it. So, Patrick, I want you to read yours first. Not yours, but whatever one you choose.
My personal one, or you want me to kind of start with one? Okay.
Yeah.
So now a disclaimer before we get into this. There are 262 comments on this thing, so it's going to take us a minute to scroll through. Due to the magic of editing, we might be able to mitigate that a little bit. But if there's ever if you hear us kind of going, it's because we're scrolling through 262 things. But I found mine that I wanted to start with, okay? Keep in mind, I'm not necessarily advocating this opinion, okay? I'm bringing it up for conversation's sake. Don't fucking kill me. Tyler Thompson says that he likes the AVP films more than the prequels. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
No, I can't say that. Those AVP films are shit.
Like, the first one is kind of fun, but that Requiem is, boy.
How about this? Because I think we can agree, even if there are unpopular opinions in favor of Requiem, which I know there's at least one of them, which probably won't even read on the air. For the sake of argument, let's assume that Tyler Thompson, although he has a crazy opinion, is saying that Requiem is in its own boat, and he's really talking about the first AVP film. Do any of you like the first AVP film more than the prequels?
No.
No.
I would say that the first AVP film is more watchable than Prometheus in terms of the story and the dialogue. Prometheus is a better made film for sure. But AVP, the first AVP film, I can sit down and watch it. It's dumb, but it's enjoyable. Whereas with Prometheus, I cannot listen to that dialogue. I cannot listen to those characters speak.
Well, we've mentioned many times in the past that you and I both watch it on mute when we try to watch Prometheus. I go as long as I can listening to them, and then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch it happen at this point.
Yeah.
You know, I will say that the one thing that I always bring up when people talk about the first AVP movie, there's two things I always bring up. One is that I can watch it with my kids and they absolutely love it. And that's nice to have. It's nice to have something like that in this, horror franchise that is like okay to show a younger generation. So I can appreciate that. The other thing is that the fucking queen runs through a whale skeleton.
How do I get out of this chicken shit outfit?
And that is
that's pretty badass.
That is just one of the great scenes in cinema history. And I have a GIF of that I have on my phone, and I don't even send it to people anymore. I just fucking watch it because it's a queen alien running through a fucking whale skeleton, and that alone elevates it pretty high in my book.
You secure that shit.
The pyramid is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like the whole, and I like the when the alien killed the predator. There was one cool shot when it fades back and he's on the skulls. That was pretty dope.
The thing I thought it's a great action movie. It's entertaining to watch. I would agree. It's dialogue wise much easier to swallow. The only thing that's always bothered me about it from the first time is that it feels too much like a summer action film. The tone of it is not in line with what you want it to be. You're hoping for 40 miles of bad road, right? Which is on paper what that movie is for the most part, I would think. But just some of the dialogue, some of the catchphrasey stuff. I think it harkens back to Predator and Arnold more than, Aliens, Alien 3, which is for, what I was paying to see. I wanted something a little bit more, genuinely dark and troubling.
I'd agree with that.
Here's the thing. All right. So Paul W.S. Anderson to me is such an interesting case study because he's clearly a talented filmmaker. He's done things that are really amazing in his career, but they've been, of course, like split apart by things that are just awful. But he also is the guy that did Event Horizon, which is one of those movies that is like horrifying and really memorable and really dark. And it's a movie that I don't even know if I actually enjoy it very much, but I'm like, it's definitely a movie that I take seriously for whatever reason. And he'd made, AVP not that long after Event Horizon. He was still that filmmaker when he made it. So I guess what I'm getting at is like clearly the studio wanted a particular type of movie from this. And as we've seen in fandom, like there's like people really would love to have seen Music of the Spears as a film. They would have really loved to have seen the first AVP comics as a film. They would have loved to have seen, for example, the 2002 video game made into a movie. Cause those are all like great ways of handling that lore. It's not a dumb concept. Okay. Aliens vs. Predator clearly is like a marketing angle because they're both owned by the same studio and it was easy to license these two aliens at the same time. But when it's told well, it really works as a mythology. This idea of there being that the predators are basically trying to control the xenomorph as like a hunt, as like a prey item, and then the prey item, because it's more than they bargained for, can get an upper hand on the predators. And then like in the midst of that, there are these interesting cultural things about the ways predators hunt and the ways predators band together. It's actually an interesting template for storytelling. And the alien crossovers have not been entirely bad. Like one of the ones that I was going to put is that, like, I think Alien vs. Judge Dredd is, like, fucking awesome. That is something that I could read that any day of the week. And those crossover comics, like the Batman one, the Superman one even, like, those are really enjoyable pieces of work to me. And I guess it's worth kind of unpacking why the AVP film that we can take at least somewhat seriously doesn't work for us. And I would posit that it's because it's not aware of itself. It's trying to basically water down Alien to make it palatable enough for general audiences without making it anything more than that or anything intentionally less than that, right? Like, it's not ridiculous on purpose, but it is kind of accidentally ridiculous. And I think it's kind of a problem from a tonal standpoint.
Well,
Agreed, 100%.
I'll say that I think that Paul W.S. Anderson really attempted to create something solid and entertaining. I could tell that he wanted to tell. I mean, I don't know. I think Event Horizon is a one-off for him. Most of his films are not good films. He struggles with story. He doesn't struggle with the films looking good. He struggles with his films being good. And AVP, the first one, is great. And for what it is, it's fun. It isn't Alien. It's not Predator. It's this weird mix of more, like you said, Michael, more Predator than sort of anything else. But it's really, I mean, for what it is, it's a fun time. I mean, I own both films, whereas AVP Requiem is just trash.
That's shit.
They clearly hired like people who were holding up the lights to direct an Alien film or to direct a AVP film, like the gaffers or whatever. Like they hired like the people holding the mic poles to direct this film.
Just doesn't make any goddamn sense.
They were definitely not hiring people who were holding lights to make it, because there was fucking no lights in that movie at all.
Oh, well, that's true.
I didn't see anything. So at least a gaffer would have known that.
There was no lights.
Yeah, there was nobody holding them up because they were behind the camera. Maybe that's the problem.
Hold it. We got to shoot this. Put down the lights.
I tried to rewatch it a few weeks ago, but yeah.
You did. I saw you, Gogol. You tried to watch it again.
Some of the effects are.
I rewatched all the movies, and when I got to the AVP movies, Requiem was tough to get through. Really, really tough.
But you did get through it.
Yeah, it's the same thing I said before we were on. Anyone who's ever asked me about it, I'm like, the main character is a pizza boy. It's like, it's like Aliens versus Predator versus Dawson's Creek. It's
awful.
That's a good way to put it. I when we were talking about this before we were recording, I was mentioning to the guys, because Michael brought up the Pizza Boy. But I was saying, I don't remember that because I saw it one time. I saw it opening night, and I immediately was like, I fucking hate this movie, but I have to sit through it. And I sat there and I watched it with an actual grimace. Like, I was grimacing during this movie. And I was there with friends, and we all walked out, and we were all like, what the fuck was that? And I just didn't talk to anybody. I just went home after it. And I have never seen it again. I've never read the Wikipedia article, the IMDb page. I know nothing about that movie because I fucking hate that it exists.
Better off.
I hate that it is a thing. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Some people might
describe a little bit, Patrick, how I was reacting to my first and second screening of Alien Covenant. I was grimacing. I was angry. I didn't hate it. I don't hate it at all, as we've discussed. But I'm just saying, I had that kind of passion, like, don't you fucking put your arms out and bow to that fucking android. I was really, really angry.
Interesting.
Mine was the opposite. I went from really, really loving it. The more I thought about it, I went, no, didn't like that. Didn't like that.
I'm assuming you're talking about Covenant, not Requiem, Dave.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, who's next?
I'll go. All right, pull it up again. All right, I don't know if I'll read out the name, but here's one. Prometheus and Covenant are just bad fan fiction movies made by people that didn't bother to watch the original movies.
Well, now, some of those people made the original movies, which is, I think, that's
what I'm pretty sure Ridley Scott saw Alien. I'm not 100% on that. You might need to research it, but I'm considering all the unused concepts. I mean, Prometheus and Covenant are pretty much, hey, we didn't use that before. Let's use that now. It's original. And, they clearly saw the movies. I get it. They have faults. I mean, you all know how much I worship Prometheus. I'm not going to champion like it's fucking Blade Runner or anything. I love the movie. It's not perfect. Covenant is a beautiful mess of ridiculousness, but at least it's entertaining. But come on now. That statement is a little out of control.
Yes, it's way out of control. It's like toxic fandom. I'm commenting, but I haven't read the article.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I've done.
But yeah, guilty. But hang on. But let's take it seriously for a second, okay? That is a common complaint, the fan fiction part, right? That it is over-reliant. Jamie, you've said this yourself. Over-reliant on tropes. That it's over-reliant on plot points from previous films, especially Covenant. I don't think Prometheus could really be construed as like valid for this fan fiction argument because it's so different in so many ways. But Covenant, in a lot of ways, suffers from trying too hard to hit similar points as Alien, especially. And I can see what he's saying, although I love the film. I can see that.
Yeah, well, Covenant has bits of Alien, beats from Alien, to use the term you guys like to use. It has from Aliens and Alien 3. It's like a mix of, as I've said a million times, it's Alien Covenant, The Force Awakens. You know, it's what it tried to be, and it's why it's all over the place. It's, you know, when it hits, but when it misses, it's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like when David plays on the flute, the Prometheus theme, that was cringeworthy.
Totally. Breaking of the fourth wall.
That was But then there's the opposite side with the whole back versus stuff, with other than them slipping on the blood 8 million times. It was one of the tense sequences in the entire franchise.
Absolutely. 100%.
I mean, it's every time I watch it, whether even from the first time I saw it in the theater on Alien Day to watching it on Blu-ray for the umpteenth time, that scene is always so good. And then it falls into the tropes. The guy gets a smoke, he dies. They have sex, they die.
And that is totally where it suffers. I completely agree.
And then the last third of the movie, the alien is, you know, out in the open, like he's throwing a party. He's like, hey, remember me? I was mysterious. Just kidding. Daniels kills the aliens like she's been fighting them their whole life alongside Amanda Ripley and Zula Hendricks. She's like the Pied Piper. Follow me. It's like, come on. But then it's really cool with the atmosphere and the setting. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde movie.
And I think a lot of people's feelings on Covenant comes down to how they reconcile the Hyde parts. For me, for example, David playing the Prometheus theme on the flute is not breaking any fourth wall. It's introducing like a layer of mystery to it, and I'm wondering like why he's doing that and what that's referencing and what that means for the film and what that means about Prometheus.
You listen to the soundtrack, obviously.
he has it on vinyl, right? But it's just,
that's not a normal thing though, Patrick. Like
no,
that doesn't usually happen in films, especially like franchise films where they're playing the theme song from another. Like that just doesn't happen. And it's not that the music was bad. It's like it just was like play something, play Bach, play some classical piece, not some other composer's theme that they wrote.
But here's the thing: is that I don't think that's what's happening. I think of it,
Deadpool.
What's that?
That's something for Deadpool. It's like
breaking the fourth wall.
Deadpool humming the Avengers theme.
The way that I look at it is that the theme in Prometheus in the first film was more diegetic than we're giving it credit for. It was basically the music of that film coming to life. It wasn't like an external soundtrack. That theme was sort of the music of David's journey, and that David coming self-actualized on the planet in Covenant. Jamie is shaking his head so hard he's going to fucking lose his dentures. That scene
I like that.
Coming that when it came out of him was showing, because this whole thing is about how like you have to learn how to play the notes to play the symphony, that you can dream in symphonies. It's about going into dream states, and it's about going outside of reality and finding something fantastical and making it real. And to me, like his whole character hinged on this idea of an impossibility. That by being flawed and being human, he was creative, and because of that, he was breaking a paradigm. And in another way, formalistically speaking, he was breaking the paradigm of that first film with this film by making the music of the first film actually retroactively diegetic. And that guy who comments in every fucking Podbean episode that he hates me is going to fucking hate that I'm saying a lot of big words. Go fuck yourself. Go ahead.
All right, let's listen.
Yes! Well,
I won't say his name.
That's proof that if you could word anything and make up for a ridiculous concept. Sorry, as beautifully worded and romantic as that was, there's no defending that scene.
And I'm with you, Patrick.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
But I would have the same problem
Covenant fans.
In the original Alien, when Ripley is in the Narcissus and she's by herself and the alien's gone and she turns on music and it's a Jerry Goldsmith theme. I would be like, what?
Yeah, but narrative, but that's not what I'm talking about thematically. The whole point is that David breaks the rules of the world that he's in. That's the whole point of that character. The whole point of him is that he transcends the limits of the film that he's in.
So ideally, I can understand what you're saying. Narratively, it does not work. Narratively takes me right out. It's like, and also, but that's really like minutia for me. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, and I just watched The Force Awakens again recently, and I'll throw it back to Covenant in a second. And I hadn't seen it in a long time. I had loved the film. I still enjoy it, I guess. But the last time I watched it with some friends 2 weeks ago, I was like, I'm bored. And, oh, look, just like A New Hope. Oh, look, just like A New Hope. Oh, the Millennium Falcon's being tractor beamed into another ship. Oh, that sounds familiar. And it was beat after beat after beat after beat of The Force Awakens, of A New Hope.
Motherfucker! Come on!
And I recently bought Covenant on 4K, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And we've been through this somewhat before, but I realized, passengers wake up, and where are we? Oh, I don't know. We're out doing something. Oh, look, beacon. Oh, we're getting a beacon from a planet. Oh, let's go explore this planet. Oh, we're going to go into a derelict. Oh, someone died. Let's shoot him out the airlock. I mean, it's beat after beat after beat of Alien. It just is. And I think does some really great new things for sure. And, there's some wonderful things. I don't have to qualify that again. What I love about the film for sure. But the more I see it, much like The Force Awakens, the less it holds up. The more it relies thematically on Alien, musically on Alien. It's not its own film. It's that relies on other films to tell its story. Alien 3 does not do that. Alien does, well, it's the first of the film, but anyway, Alien 3 doesn't do that. But Prometheus does it, though. Prometheus relies on the elements of past films to tell its stories, where you have a crew, they're going somewhere, but they go down there, they explore a derelict, they bring something back, all hell breaks loose. Maybe there's not an alien, but the engineers, which I love, stand in the place of the alien for sure. Even aesthetically, they stand in that place. But there's also, I think, there's a lot more creatively going on in Prometheus than there's ever going on in Covenant.
At least Prometheus tries to be its own thing. I mean, at least I know you guys can't stand the dialogue. I could handle it, but thematically,
you love that dialogue, Gogol.
He loves that dialogue.
You fucking love that dialogue. You fucking write that shit. Listen, we do have to move on from this. I want to say one thing. Okay, I agree that plot point wise, it totally echoes Alien too much. It's too slavish to it. I agree that musically, it employs themes from Alien. Although we just did a whole episode on this, and I don't think that it's overly slavishly reliant on it. But I can see that argument. Thematically, I fucking 100% disagree with you. I actually think the themes in Covenant are so far away from the themes in Alien that I'm not even distracted by the plot similarities because I'm focusing on very different things. And I think that might be a gateway into why we have different... I'm flapping my fingers a lot. That might be a gateway into why we have very different feelings about the film, even though we both love and hate almost the same exact elements of it. I mean, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah, the same complaints that I have of it are the same complaints you have of it. But the thing is that, to me, the themes in Covenant are fascinating on their own and very different from Alien, and I go towards those themes and away from the complaints that I have about similar plot points. The themes in The Force Awakens are the same fucking themes as New Hope. Like, that is something that, to me, and J.J. Abrams, as talented as he is, does that really well. He does incredible fan, not testaments, it's not like a fan production. It's like a fan tribute, right? He does these like Star Trek. That's why he gets these franchises to quote unquote reboot. Is because he can just kind of
safe as houses.
Yes, exactly. And he can do it again, and people will go see it, and it will be good, and people will enjoy it. I still enjoy The Force Awakens a lot. I don't go to sleep thinking about it at night.
As do I.
I still think about Covenant in my dreams, though, and that to me signals that it is thematically different enough to warrant being taken more seriously. I'm going to shut up. Let's move on.
Okay, I want to make one last statement. Here's because you were saying we agree about a lot of things about Covenant, and we really do. But I think where I differ from you is the entirety of Alien 3, and definitely Aliens, but I talk about Alien and Alien 3 because for me those movies are like sacred holy relics, in my opinion. And the subject matter is treated with reverence and as sacred objects. Ripley as a sacred object, the alien as a sacred object, the space. And I did not get that feeling of sacredness at all from Covenant.
Bitch, what happens when the chest burster comes out in Covenant? It plays a fucking hymn tune. That is sacred.
You're being really literal.
That is sacred,
here.
Jamie.
I'm not.
That is sacred.
Anyways,
church is in session.
Jamie,
let's fucking move on.
Jamie, every frame of Covenant is 5 or 18 layers of multicultural references to Lawrence of Arabia and rare, unread poems that were only written in 1885 BC by a writer who died while thinking of the word android, and whose first 8 initials of his family were David.
Holy shit.
So please, don't say a bad word about
Show
Covenant.
some goddamn respect. Michael, you want to go? You got one?
Mine was about Covenant actually being a good movie, and talking about how people who liked that one or hated that one loved Aliens, implying that, they don't like the highbrow, all that kind of stuff. I don't totally agree with this statement, but I would say it relates to my personal, probably unpopular opinion with a lot of people that I think out of the original 3 movies, the second one is probably my least favorite at this point.
You do not want to fuck with me.
I love it, but it's my least favorite of the original 3. And at this point, I think I probably watched that the least. I think I watch Covenant and Prometheus more than I watch Aliens at this point. So
thanks for being on the show, Michael. We really.
Bye.
Yeah.
No, I know Jamie and I agree with you on that, but Dave, you're a pretty big Aliens fan, so why don't you fucking stick up for it?
Well, listen, I've seen Aliens more times than I can count, but it's still my favorite. I watch Prometheus more than Aliens now. It's not because I don't think Aliens is a good movie. I just have more to discover watching Prometheus than to do Aliens, which I've seen more times than I can count, which granted isn't very high, but that's beside the point. Because in the new movies, even though some parts of Covenant drive me crazy, there's a little more discovered, just the way they're shot. Like I joked about before, they're made a little more artsy fartsy, so to speak, where there's a little more stuff to play with and break down and research. Where Aliens, it's a little bit, there's some stuff you could break down, but it's a little more straightforward. So on Covenant and Prometheus being newer, it makes sense. And saying like Aliens at least out of Alien and Alien 3 isn't really an insult. The 3 excellent movies, it's just a matter of taste. And those 3 movies are so interchangeable, really depending upon where you are in your life or what you're feeling. There's all 3 of those movies could fit whatever the fuck you're going through. So to me, Alien, the top 3 movies are completely interchangeable depending upon what your mood is.
Yeah, well said. I would agree with you, especially on the point of Covenant and Prometheus being new, because I'm gonna agree with you guys that the more, especially Covenant, the more I watch it, the less I'm able to tolerate a lot of it. I really enjoyed it on its merits when I first saw it, but and Aliens, I'm also gonna kind of go back on what I said a little bit, that I think Aliens is a better film all around, clearly, than either Covenant or Prometheus. Because it doesn't, for the reasons you guys mentioned, it doesn't lean on the beats of the previous film. It's maybe it was you guys who were talking about it, that the opening sequences of Aliens were still in Ridley Scott's film, and then after that, James Cameron starts opening up the universe himself and makes it his own. It takes it in a whole different direction. Now, I think the thing that I'm tired with is not necessarily Aliens itself, but the fact that so much of the extended universe and the books and novels, and especially comic books and video games, want to retread everything, the superficial elements of that story with just shooting aliens up. And that completely undermines the what's the horror writers, the horror writer guy,
Edgar Allan Poe.
The elements, the other guy,
Lovecraft
King.
H.P.
Lovecraft.
Lovecraft.
The Lovecraftian elements of Alien are completely undermined if you continue down that road. They're still intact in Aliens, I think, in a really great way, because it's obvious how it's still intact there. But it's still a really frightening experience. He was able to keep that going. But, if you keep just doing soldiers versus aliens immediately after that second film, it's just kind of, all right, we've seen this before. Like, there's the entire Colonial Marines series, which wasn't horrible and the artwork was good, but all right, it's time to get inventive again, and which is why I will never stop loving that third movie. They went completely the other direction, whereas William Gibson, really worthy effort, and strong script with a lot of good political commentary running through it, I think. I don't know if that was the right direction when I look at it. I can see why it wasn't, why Brandywine didn't want to go with that one. And Alien 3, I think, was just a total. I mean, that is the best possible outcome for that character. I think that was a great way to end the series, end Ripley, and just draw it to a close without overdoing it, which then they continued to do. But, well,
I fucking love Alien 3 so much. What a great movie.
Yeah, me too. What about that assembly cut? What do you guys prefer?
Well, actually, that was going to be the next one I was going to bring up. You want to throw that on the table? There's some actually. Can I pull up the thread on this? So Bradley John Sudbeck, good friend of the show, good friend of ours, says he likes the theatrical cut of Alien 3 better. And then he got about 700 people agreeing with him, and so he was like, maybe this isn't. Yeah, so do I. But let's talk about this, but let's also read through some of the comments on here, and we can kind of like unpack it. So there's a scene from The Office of people giving a high five. I said that I agreed with him. Let's see who else says that. So Aaron Lee Peck says the only thing I would change about the assembly cut is keep the dog bursting scene, remove all the ox scenes. There's a lot of ox scenes, and keep the theatrical ending. Okay. Bradley says, in response to Aaron, that he's on board with that. The reason he prefers the theatrical cut are for those two key differences. The dog was more emotionally impactful than the ox. Yeah, I fucking agree with that. And the final chest burst with Ripley was a nice touch. Aaron agrees with him. Mitch Mitchell, another good buddy of ours, says, I prefer highly the dog burst edit. What up, Mitchie? But the queen bursting is too over the top. It looks silly and lessens her sacrifice if it pops out that quickly. I think it's a ton more meaningful if she still had a chance when she decided to jump. Mitch, I'm going to fucking on air agree with you about that, okay? I have never thought about it until you said that. I agree that it is more powerful, actually, if she jumps without even you knowing if she necessarily had to. That is very powerful. I'm going to go ahead and jump on that. Let's wrap this up. So then another good friend of ours, Jason, starts getting into a troll battle with Bradley. This was a lot of fun. This went on for about 40 comments. But my point being, it was a really interesting conversation, and there was more agreement around that than I think any of us would have expected. And that is surprising because the narrative in popular culture that has emerged from this is that it was the assembly cut that basically was responsible for this, renaissance of opinion on Alien 3. Again, it was supervised by Charles Lauzarica, really good friend of ours, one of the best dudes out there, incredibly talented. This is not a knock on Charles Lauzarica by any means. But it's interesting that in culture, people are kind of talking about it like, well, now it's the movie it was kind of supposed to be. Now it's a masterpiece. To me, the theatrical cut is the masterpiece, and it is a stronger film for many reasons than the assembly cut.
But there's also some holes in the theatrical cut in terms of
big ones.
What's the character's name with the blood all over his face that's in the infirmary? He disappears.
I love all the Gallic stuff.
There's like a whole sub-movie of Gallic in the assembly cut. Yeah.
There's another scene, too, where a character just disappears, in the assembly cut where they trap the alien and then they let the alien out. Someone lets the alien out because they revered, and it's like, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that someone would have done that.
Right.
So to me, that just like that takes the masterpiece and breaks it in half. Like it's like Prometheus level ridiculous.
No, I mean the guy's nuts. He's locked
I thought Golic releasing it was on point. I like that.
He thinks I love the idea because it's like it's so ridiculous that it's tragic. It's such a David Fincher move to me. It's just so everything about it is like, oh, they trapped it. Like somebody finally trapped this thing, and then the guy lets it. I thought it was fantastic the first time I saw that. I was like, wow, that is a major. I don't know. I thought that really worked for me.
I guess in theory I could. Thanks for coming on the show.
You secure that shit.
No.
Get the fuck out.
I think in theory I understand what you're saying. I just feel like to me it seemed like a device to get the alien out again. Because at that point, with the aliens trapped, I guess the film is sort of going to end soon, right? Not that the film should have ended, but they need it to get loose again. So, let's have someone let it free. So to me, it felt like a plot, a device more than it felt like a story to let this thing loose again. Then it felt like an important moment in the story. That's all. I mean, I agree. I get what you're saying.
Fair.
I'll go with you. I'll go with you that I feel like maybe if they had something happening dramatically that would have forced him to do that somehow, as opposed to he's just nuts. He let it out because he thinks that it's speaking to him in his thoughts and dreams. Maybe if somehow there was something else dramatically or narratively going on that would have forced him into that position somehow, I think that might have been a little bit more interesting. I'll go that far.
And I would think that maybe part of why it's not super powerful is that it forces a fourth act into the film, and it makes it, because of that, more directly parallel to the two previous movies. One of the great innovations of Alien was the fourth act. That was like such a shock for people that it was on the Narcissus with her and that the movie was not over yet, right? And then in Aliens, Cameron, like, he gets away with it because the movie is just so incredibly well made and so propulsive that he could do anything. Like, the alien could turn into a fucking dildo and you'd still be like, okay, it makes sense, because it's so good.
Well, it basically is, right?
Essentially it is, right? And then in the end, the queen dildo, of course,
observation.
Thank you. Yes. Well done, Michael, the artist on staff here. So, like, in the fourth one, the queen dildo, of course, pops out and forces a fourth act again. And it's like, it's like, okay, I guess, like, we can go with this. But that's something that people have an issue with. How did she get on the ship? How did all these other things, right? And also, like, it's clearly paralleling the first film. Alien 3 gets a de facto fourth act if the alien gets let out again. And it becomes less novel. And I 1000% agree with you guys.
That's fair. I never thought of that. That's fair.
The reason why Alien 3 is so fucking brilliant is because it is so different. And it is because it is so different because of Vincent Ward. And that is something that we just do not talk about enough. Even though we have a whole episode on it, Vincent Ward is the reason that movie is so crazy, because he had no business being anywhere near an Alien movie. Like, he was just he just done this fantasy film, this New Zealand crazy fantasy movie that won at a festival, and he was on the radar of the studio, and they were like, why don't we have this random fucking dude who was kind of like a Ridley Scott who had just done a historical epic, right, come and direct this movie. And Vincent Ward, because he's brilliant and nuts, was like, well, we're going to make it about a floating monastery, right? Which who would ever have the idea to do that? But he had just been working.
Fantastic.
He had been working with, like, mythology and with monks and shit, and he, like, was in that headspace. And that's why that happened. And so then all of the subsequent rewrites and all of the reworkings had to react to that. So even though he was gone for years before the movie was made, everything that happened between him and the film being finished was in response to that fucking crazy-ass script that he gave them, which I love, and which is one of my favorite unproduced scripts ever made. So, like, So Vincent Ward is the reason why it's so novel, and I think that's why it's so strong.
But I would say that Fincher did go on record to say that he wasn't a big fan of Aliens. And I think there's definitely a lot of Fincher. Of course, there are tons of Vincent Ward. I mean, Aliens does rely on some beats from Alien. It's just, some major beats from Alien. The Queen in the end, there's a final countdown. She's got to get out. She doesn't go back for a cat. She goes back for a little girl. I mean, there's some, but like you said, Patrick, the film is so different. It explores such different territory that we can forgive that. The Force Awakens can't do that. The Force Awakens doesn't explore that strong territory enough for us to overlook Starkiller Base or overlook all of the other beats. And that takes somebody really smart, and Cameron was.
100% agreed. Yeah.
All right, should we go to the next?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll go. Our friend Bryant Dillon says,
"What up, Bryant?
Alien Resurrection wasn't that bad. Just needs a few tweaks. Alien Resurrection is horseshit. It is garbage. Now, it's beautiful. It's well made. It is not an alien film. Tonally, it's not an alien film.
Yep.
It's this anomalous, well put together, terribly written thing that is off floating in space somewhere, like Zod and the rest of them in Superman, whatever that thing where they were in. But yeah, I also like people who tend to don't kill me, Bryant. I don't want to. A lot of people who are fans of Firefly and like marginal science fiction that's really saccharine
marginal science. Oh, people are gonna lose their shit, Jamie. People are gonna fucking. You're gonna get certain people on Podbean too that hate you.
Joss Whedon is not a good. He's not a good writer. He just isn't a good writer.
No, he's
written
not.
some good stuff.
Motherfucker, come on!
He has written some good stuff. The first Avengers film was great. Buffy was ridiculous. Angel was all right. Joss Whedon is not a good writer. He just isn't. And
he's really
largely,
and that it.
Largely, the Alien Resurrection fails because of its story, not because of its visuals, not because of its acting. Some of the casting too was shit for sure, and certainly the direction of it, where it felt like this parody, like weird. I'm gonna take a piece of brain from my head and look at it.
And fucking like, cross-eyed.
I'm gonna wake up in the middle of the night and there's hair all over my shoulders and I'm gonna be freaked out. Like,
yeah, you just don't like Dan Hedaya, man.
No, I don't mind Dan Hedaya. I think
you fucking hate him.
But God,
no, I don't mind him.
Come on.
Yeah, it's just a bad film. It just really is, and I understand. I think I do that with certain films where you try to like be the voice for the stick up for the film. There is no sticking up for Alien Resurrection.
Oh, this sticking up for
bad film. No, there isn't. I mean, yes, there is, but it's one of those films in fandom that's almost universally loathed.
Yeah, like if you don't have dignity in yourself or your fandom, yeah, absolutely. You if you want
Brian, don't kill
hate
me.
You.
So here's the thing. So Alien Resurrection, I feel like actually is not universally loathed, and I think that this thread is a really good indicator of that because so here we go. So Scott Crimson Walker, I like Alien Resurrection. I like what it showed corp wise. I thought the movie was good. Mark Smith, I like Resurrection way more than Covenant. Let's see. Okay, so Dominic Nardi, Resurrection had some interesting ideas, but lousy execution. Alien 3 has nothing interesting. Travis Dean says all the movies are great and enjoyable if you like them for what they are. There are many people down here who say that they actually like the fourth film, and I have to say that I do not hate it by any stretch of the imagination. Jerk off. There are things in Resurrection that I like. So the reason why I'm going to say that, an example of an unimpeachably terrible movie is AVPR, okay? That is a movie that is not worth talking about because it is trash on every conceivable level. Alien Resurrection is a movie that is not complete trash, although the end result is trash. The constituent parts of that trash are interesting. It's kind of like Sea Glass, right? It's garbage, but it's garbage that's interesting to look at. Or Dave Goebel, right? Or just Long Island, right? It's all the same thing. Here's the thing. It's made by a director who is, like, quantitatively speaking, brilliant. I mean, he has turned out incredible work. The effects were nuts on that movie. It was like, I mean, in some ways, some of the best practical effects we've gotten in the whole series.
That's not anyone's issues, though, with the film.
No, but what I'm saying is that there are
Artful Dodger Patrick over here.
The Artful Dodger, fartful. There are many things to like about this movie. The cinematography is groundbreaking with the colloidal silver. Sure. It was shot by a brilliant person. Jean-Pierre Jeunet is a great filmmaker. Tom Woodruff and Alec Gillis did some of their best work on this movie. They had the biggest budget they'd ever had. They did a lot. But these are all interesting constituent parts. Do you see what I'm saying?
That's what the aliens look like.
And Joss Whedon, they do look like
films
shit.
Films don't have a hard time looking good. Films have a hard time being good. That's the issue with Covenant.
But I'm not saying it's good.
That should be my dating profile.
There's enough worth unpacking in it that is good, that it makes it something that you can actually have a conversation about. Because the distance between what made the movie and how the movie came up is really fascinatingly wide. Like, there's a big distance between the people on set making that movie and the movie as it actually came out. And that's why I think it's a movie that's actually interesting to talk about.
I think that there's a cardinal sin, though, and I've discussed this before, and I think you know what I'm going to say, Patrick. The cardinal sin with Alien Resurrection.
Dan Hedaya.
Even with the stuff that I could probably, if I had to, look over it, there's one glaring, huge flaw. What do you think I'm talking about? What's the biggest flaw in this film that I cannot get over, that makes me not want to watch the film ever again?
I will abstain from this and let the other two answer this, and then I'll go.
Okay.
The slapstick awful comedy?
No, it's not it.
No?
Gutierrez, what do you think?
Bringing Ripley back for no reason at all?
You're close. You're warm.
A number of things going through my head right now. I'm having trouble nailing one of them down.
Cardinal sin for me. You bring Ripley back and she does nothing. She is useless. She go from one of the most important characters in the first three films to this character who's got some interesting genetic stuff going on.
It's not interesting.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean? Like,
it's dumb.
And her character.
A little bit.
But like, I mean, in terms of like the character being different from the original Ripley, so it's a little bit interesting. Okay, she's different. She's not the same. She's got an 8 tattooed on her arm. Okay, whatever. There's the clone room scene, which I thought was really dynamic. Yeah. Aside from that, you have the star of the film do nothing. So, like, to me, you don't have a film there. If you can't bring Ripley back, and again, I said this before on an episode, I have to say it again. There's an interview with Joss Whedon where he's talking about, when they were talking about writing Alien Resurrection, and he's like, I was really afraid that Sigourney Weaver would say, could you write in a cute puppy for me? And I'm thinking, why the fuck are you writing an Alien film if that's what you think Sigourney Weaver? If that's what you think Sigourney Weaver was going to say to you while you're writing this film, you have no business writing this film. If that's
the same guy who writes in that she's going to have this impromptu basketball game.
Yeah.
Like,
how embarrassing is that fucking basketball sequence? How cringy is that shit?
She had nothing to do.
Bad. Impossible.
Catwoman totally. Basketball scene, I know.
Which is funny because Pitoff was in charge of the effects for Alien Resurrection, who directed Catwoman.
Well, the costumes, yeah. See, this is another great example, Jamie. This is what I'm talking about. So Pitoff is a legendary figure in Hollywood, and in French, especially in French cinema. He was a legend, and he not only made
movies are the Pitoff.
But he made fucking Catwoman, which is maybe the worst movie I've ever seen in a movie theater in my life. I remember seeing that with my parents as a kid. That's what we call that. Well, yes, exactly.
Shit-chronicity.
Shit-chronicity.
It is so interesting, right? Like, how the fuck does this stuff happen?
Well, it happens when you get people who don't understand the tone of the It's always interesting with you watch or read interviews with Jean-Pierre Jeunet talking about how much he loved the first film. Well, what did you love about it if you couldn't make a film that was tonally in line with it? What did you love about it if you felt like you had to make a comedy? What did you love about it if you had to go and watch big blockbuster films to see how they do it to make an Alien film? Like,
it's full of shit.
Incongruous, is that the right word?
Well, that's the thing. He even says, he's like, not to interrupt, but he even said, I think in the behind the scenes stuff, he's like, I did not know why they would pick me to make this film and all this stuff. And I was like, there you go, right there. Like,
and he's literally like, at first I did not want to do the film, and then I thought about it. I'm like, just maybe that was a sign that you maybe shouldn't have done the film, right? He just done Amelie. It's like one of the great movies of the 90s,
Like, just go to Hollywood, like, and big, like, that's not, like, that's how you fuck over an Alien film. And it's just, and again, I will say, I'll walk back some comments. I don't think it's complete garbage. I think there's some marginally interesting things there, but at the same time, you have it heavily relies upon films of the past for story beats. Heavily, even though there's some major differences in terms of the aliens being grown there. But then what happens is the same thing that happens in the rest of the films. They break out, face hugged, chest bursted, like point A to point B, countdown. Ripley has to jump into the Betty. Oh, there's an alien on board. We got to get it out. It sucked. Like, it's just the same film over and over. And what's so funny about this, what's so ironic, there's a line in Aliens at the beginning of the film that Ripley says, how many different times do you want me to tell the same story? No. How many different ways do you want me to tell the same story? And I feel like that's Aliens been.
And she does it even in Resurrection. She's like, they'll breed, you'll die.
Yeah.
End of film.
Great. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, right. Roll credits, right?
Not so much.
Totally. That's the whole film.
I know.
Yeah, when I did my Alien rewatch, when I got to Alien Resurrection, it's like Patrick said, other than Requiem, at least it's, as awful it is, it's somewhat watchable, though usually once the newborn comes up, I just go, stop watching. God. But, it has a couple funny lines. The Ripley 8 call dynamic, a little interesting at points, especially in the director's cut, whatever the fuck it is. And Johnner is pretty badass. But other than that, it's just, Christie arguably has the worst acting performance in the entire franchise. Doctor, you're telling me more of these awkward pause things, awkward pause on board. Johnner sacrificing himself for no reason. But it's
I can't put them down, man. They're attached to me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Christie's sacrificing himself. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's
like Cole
whatever.
with the fucking boxing gloves on. I'm like,
oh my god,
what movie am I watching? What is this?
I will say that was a great visual.
Yeah, it was. Walmart buying out Waylon Yutani. Go fuck yourself.
Again, I can still smell that scene.
I mean,
that just made it a Walmart film. Like, it made that whole scene made it a film that you'd see in a Walmart bin that nobody wants.
Right. And also the fact that this movie takes place so far in the future from the previous film. Like, this is such a leap in time, and it looks like shit. Like, there's like no indication that anything is different other than that we're told it with a title card at the beginning. I do have to say, though, in this special edition or director's cut or whatever the fuck it is that I've never actually watched all the way through, I do like the way it ends more when they actually get to Paris. I think that's actually kind of interesting. And but I do also want to say that I agree with Jamie, and this is what I knew you were going to bring up, so that's why I didn't want to say it first, that if you were going to bring Ripley back after she has my favorite death sequence in any film ever made in Alien 3, and regardless of the edition of the film you're talking about, both of them are just so powerful, especially given Elliot Goldenthal's scoring, which is just like fucking life-changing the first time you hear that.
Oh, yeah.
So powerful, and it is so redemptive.
Terminator death scene?
I do the thumbs up. All that could have happened is the thumbs up. And then you're going to bring her back from that and then make her fucking useless. That is just an unimpeachable offense.
Yeah.
And that is why I was so upset about the whole Blomkamp thing, which we obviously don't need to get into. But I was like, just don't do this anymore. Just do not, like, let her have that death. We can pretend Resurrection is just a funny exercise. That's it.
Yeah. Should we pick our unpopular opinions?
Yes.
Or if we're going to do that?
That's a great idea.
Already than everyone else's. Of course it is. I said it.
I'm trying to remember what mine was. I had one, and I was like, oh, that's super unpopular. I'll think of it.
I'll go first, since I know it would be popular with this crowd. I like Prometheus and think it's just as good as Alien 3.
Game over!
Wow. Dave, bitch, you better fucking buckle up.
Thanks
personal preference. Just knowing you guys have a good night.
Dave, there's traffic outside. You should probably play in.
Way to know your audience.
Okay, so let's unpack this for a second. So give us why that's the case for you. Why do you love Prometheus so much, other than the brain damage you suffered as a child?
Man, I mean big.
These things ain't ants.
I know that.
Well, that's still something I'm going to therapy for, especially after knowing you guys for a few years. It's really impacted that particular condition. All right, so we're gonna be serious for a minute. But for me, for Prometheus, obviously I've been obsessed with this franchise for years, and it was dead for a while. And Prometheus is really the first movie that I followed from beginning to end. Like I was excited that it was gonna be an Alien prequel. Then it got changed to this weird Prometheus title. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then when I saw it in the theater, I went with a bunch of friends, and all of a sudden my fandom that was stuck in cryosleep came back. Though the movie obviously has its heavy negatives, I had a blast of a time. This was before I got into any Facebook groups. Me and my friends were text messaging each other, going over theories like, what is this? What's the green stone? Did they create the aliens? Like, we were just going nuts, having these little, I used to call them the Prometheus roundtables. As flawed as the movie was, it brought back a lot of the mystery and questions for us, which we enjoyed the shit out of. It's one of the few, just like, I could enjoy watching Prometheus and, reading little articles and breakdowns of it, which was something I hadn't done in years. So it kind of brought me back from the dead in terms of liking the franchise. That's, that plays a big part in it.
I think that's totally valid. And I think that
I can see that for sure.
I think you're absolutely right that Prometheus's novelty and how long it took for that to come out from the previous film, and the fact that it was a completely new utterance in most ways, and it was really just the first indication we had of where Ridley Scott was in his filmmaking life at that point and what he wanted to do with this stuff, is really interesting and something that is very fun to talk about and to create fan fiction out of and to discuss with friends and family. And it is inspirational because it's very different and it's very interesting, and I can totally get on board with that, but the movie's a fucking ridiculous film.
That's fair. I won't. I'm not close my mouth before I go, I'm not gonna give you some wordy Scrabble SAT words to defend it.
That was just a dig on you, Patrick.
Absolutely not.
Verisimilitude.
I don't know what you're talking about. I know it's not the best movie, but to me, I just enjoy it just as much as Alien 3, just for it's for completely different reasons.
What's your favorite part of it?
Totally.
What?
What's your favorite part of it?
Prometheus?
Yeah, Prometheus.
I like when they're exploring the ship and they see all the vases and the green stuff. You're like, what the fuck is this? It kind of triggers a lot of.
Sure.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, and it's all I just like the whole openness of it, which is part of my problems with the sequel is, whereas Prometheus asked all these questions, Covenant was like, here's all the questions answered, whether you like them or not, here you go. And I just prefer the mystery over, what Covenant did, just for me.
Yeah, I'm on board with that myself. Yeah, I love that the first 3.5 minutes of Prometheus is basically like you could put a Tool song over it. It's basically a Tool music video. I was like, this is like a Tool music video. It was amazing. I thought that was so cool.
Well done.
Yeah, I've said before on this show, the first 10 minutes of Prometheus are some of my favorite 10 minutes in any Alien movie. I could watch that over and when I was in Iceland last year, flying into Reykjavik, I was like watching this fucking landscape unfold, and I was like, whoa, I do love some things about Prometheus. It's easy to forget that because so much of it is fucking garbage, but there are things that I love about it too.
It is a beautiful film. I mean, it's amazing to look at.
I'd say that there's way more to, definitely, for me, I think about watching Prometheus and I just think feast for the eyes, unlike I've seen in any film since Alien. Alien 3 isn't as much of a feast for the eyes. There's so much more tonally happening in Alien 3 that's like transfixing, whereas for me, Prometheus is transfixing visually, and that's what makes up a little bit for it. Even though I can't listen to it, I can watch it every day and just watch it. It's just gorgeous.
It is incredible to see Ridley Scott having gotten to a point in his like visual artistry where he can really realize the things that he was sketching out in his Ridleygrams like so ambitiously, I mean, Prometheus is an absolute visual feast. I completely agree with you. Dialogue sucks.
Fair enough. I can't argue that.
What about you, Michael? Do you have an unpopular opinion you want to share?
I don't know how unpopular mine is, but I am 150% against Neil Blomkamp helming an Alien film at all. Alien 3.5 or anything. I don't want to see it. I don't think it's going to come out good.
Jamie's going to do a fucking hashtag bring back Ripley campaign again over here.
Bringing back Ripley, if you can make it work, fine. If you're gonna make it work and there's a good reason for it, fine. But Neil, I look at the artwork that he put out and I'm like, this is what you want us to see about this, and I think the artwork is horrible. It looks too much like everything else we've been seeing for the last 25 years in the comics, and it's an extrapolation on Aliens. And that's not what I want to see. I want to see something new. I want to see something inventive. Like, be an artist. If you're going to come to this table, you're supposed to bring something new, especially with Alien, because there's nothing else like Alien out there. So don't be regurgitating the same things over and over again. Bring something new, especially if you're going to bring Ripley back. You need a new angle, and it can't be stupid. Like, I don't know what this Xenosuit thing is. That does not look like a good direction. That does not look positive to me in any way. I'm a complete downer about it. I know, so I'll shut up now. Shut up.
I actually agree.
I agree too. To be honest with you,
I agree.
As much as I wanted to see that, it's only because what we had been seeing was like, where's the alien that I love? Yeah. So I'd rather bring back a character that I know I could believe in, even though it's the wrong decision to make. Let's not retread. And that's why Alien 3 is brilliant, because it's made different choices. Part of me was like, what else is there? What else is there to root for? So yeah, sure, bring her back. But I completely agree with you.
Couldn't be worse than Ripley 8, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's what I choose.
It would probably be it would probably be better than both Covenant and Prometheus.
I am the ultimate badass.
Yeah. To be honest with you,
what the fuck, Jamie? What are you talking about?
Possibly.
In terms of dialogue and
motherfucker, come on!
I'm not. Even though it's
jerk off,
unwarranted.
You really think that? Listen, Neil Blomkamp, okay, for the 300th time on the show, Neil Blomkamp made one great movie 12 years ago, or whatever it was at this point. And since then, he's made a couple of okay movies, a bad movie, and then he's been kicked off of like 5 projects in a row. And now he has an independent studio that is not going anywhere because it's a crowdfunded platform that basically the only way he can make the movies he wants to make is with this platform. And those movies are like kind of interesting to watch, but like I don't see anything great about them. I have no trust in him as a filmmaker. I think also District 9 is something that was successful because it was an interesting allegory for us to unpack as a global film-going audience. But I also think that a lot of filmmakers who grew up during the apartheid era in South Africa probably would have had a similar lens into it. Maybe they wouldn't have had the idea to marry science fiction to that idea, but like, that was a great idea that might not have been unique to him, but it was a great idea and he executed it well. I think District 9 is a pretty good movie with an amazing idea behind it, and I see no reason to think that he is the person who should have been given the fucking crown to make the next Alien movie. And I'm upset that people would go so far as to not only defend that vision, but also to say that we should fucking rewrite the history that we've had now for 20 years with Alien 3, which all of us on this show tonight, except for Gogol, but he doesn't count because he's crazy, are agreeing is one of the greatest films in the entire franchise. It is a fucking masterpiece. And you're telling me that...
Never said that.
You never said what?
I never said Alien 3 wasn't one of the greatest movies in the franchise.
Yeah, so you love it too, right? Okay, so like...
Of course I do. I just said it was one of the top 3 before. Are you listening to me?
Right. No, I don't listen to anything. So my headphones are actually on. All I can hear is myself.
I am the ultimate
jerk off.
So like, we are all saying this, and everybody in fandom agrees that Alien 3 is an amazing triumph. And if you want to fucking write it off as a dream sequence, go ahead. But I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to retread it.
That notion is so ridiculous to me. We've lived with Alien 3. It's canon at this point, you know, and it's like we said, you know, ever since that, we've had a complete rebirth in the last 16 years since the quadrilogy and the extended version of Alien 3. It's pretty well accepted now. There are still a lot of people who are unsatisfied with it or flat out don't like it, but I think there's a far more people now who like it than
a lot of people widely regard Alien 3 as their favorite now. It's nowhere near uncommon. It's completely
very respectful.
Rejuvenated. Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't that crazy to see that happening in real time? Like, we were all here for this, guys, on the ground floor of this sea change in opinion on this movie. And it's amazing. You know, Gogol, I have to say, you are one of the only people who's made me think twice about this before. To your credit, because I had my headphones on so I could hear you when you were saying this. You were mentioning the Blumhouse stuff and specifically the Halloween reboot. And I agree with you that in overwriting, you know, we're going to see this again momentarily with fucking Terminator, the dark shit that's coming out.
Oh my God.
That you can get to a point where you say, okay, let's clean the slate and let's do a reboot that takes off after the original movie or movies and sort of sets a new narrative direction, and you can pull it off really well, as Blumhouse did with Halloween. Totally get that. But it's so different because the Halloween universe, which I also love, like I know you do, Gogol, that is something that has just become so ridiculous over time.
It's gotten out of control.
It's gotten like intentionally campy, and then it's kind of like stupid. But also like the universe that it operates in has not grown. You know, we had the Strode family, and then we had this cult, and then all of a sudden he's like magical, and then it's like, okay, let's just get rid of that shit, right? With Alien, like, all these movies are different, and they operate in a shared universe that's expanding and really interesting, and there's a lot going on in this shared universe, and like, to jettison it out the window, to me, would be missing out on a lot of great opportunities for storytelling, and so that's one reason why I would differently. But you did make me think about it.
You guys remember, I was a big proponent of the Neil Blomkamp Alien whatever is 3.75. At first I thought it was a great idea, but as time has gone on, I realized, this is not a good idea. It'd be great to have Ripley back, but like you got to echo what you guys said, it has to be done right. And now I'm just all about, if we're going to do another Alien movie, let's just do something new. If you want to close out the trilogy, whether it's in the comics or an animated show or a novel, that's fine. Or if it gets a movie, I'm obviously fine with that too. But if you want to do a movie, let's do something fucking new. Forget, unless you want to mention just like the events of it happening, which would make sense. New characters, new story. There's so much of the timeline to play with. You could do it at the same time. You could do it after Aliens, during and before Alien 3. There's so much universe to explore out there. You don't have to be connected to the same characters, the same story, the same ship, the same planets. These fucking xenomorph bastards are fucking everywhere. There's enough Weyland-Yutani outposts where you could make up some sort of story. We don't need the same connected universe. We don't need some MCU bullshit in fucking Alien. Just do something brand new. Give a new audience, the old audience, give them something new to connect to. Just forget making everything connect the dots. Do something brand new, kickstart a new franchise, boom, done. That's it.
Totally
I think they
agree,
would have
my
done
friend.
that at this point if they
agree.
hadn't been in the middle of, started up this whole Ridley Scott engine like 10
that's
years
a
ago
problem
now.
too.
2008, 2009 is when they were. I think 2009 is when they were really starting pre-production officially. So
That's when Ridley Scott. I still remember him saying,
kinda
"Oh, I'm going to do
stuck in
6 movies." No, you're not.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
to
would-
answer. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to agree with Dave that I think that maybe give it a mention, but start something completely new. Like, we don't need Ripley. Her story's over. Alien 3 ended it perfectly. We can ignore Resurrection. Most people do. And just carry it forward. Like, I'm sorry. There was no need for me to say that.
No, I just
Story of
think
my life.
a reminder, and Patrick and I have discussed this at length, a reminder as to why that Neil Blomkamp's idea was initially like, whoa, this might be exciting, because Prometheus had just released a couple years earlier, and people were like, what the fuck is this? And so we have this pivot to nostalgia. We pivot to, and I'm not saying we should at all. And we've seen where that's, but I have those instincts too, where it's like, and I've been struggling with fandom myself, with sort of finding like, well, what is there to be interested about? We don't know if movies are coming. They haven't made any announcements. The prequels have been wildly uneven, often unsuccessful, yet successful. Just this kind of amalgamation of, I don't know what. And so when I hear that the idea of someone that I have believed in, and I do believe in, I still believe in, I think about it every day in terms of being brought back, I'm thinking, and I've said these same words before, what else do you have for me? Because what I'm seeing is not sitting with me. So not to say that, oh, let's just go back to do what's easy, because I agree, that's just easy. That's too easy. And that story has been wrapped up. And we need to get away from Ripley. We need to get away from Amanda Ripley. We need to get away from all of it. This isn't the MCU. This isn't Star Wars. And we need to find a director like Christopher Nolan, or someone who can
Alex
Garland, Alex Garland for sure. And I also would agree that Blomkamp isn't the guy for it, probably. And if he is going to make an Alien film, it's going to have to be written by someone who can write, and not someone who can sort of write. And I thought Elysium had some great ideas in it, but it was eventually Fern Gully and Avatar in that same kind of white man savior story that's so prominent in films a lot.
Does anybody talk about it?
No.
No,
Right.
you're the only person I've heard bring that name up in the last 2 years. Like, that's a movie that just came and went and fucking disappeared because it's not memorable, you know?
It's forgettable. I like the movie, but it's forgettable.
I saw it twice in the theater. The first time, I was like, oh, a little problematic. I left the second time like, what the fuck was this? Like, I was like, this movie was... I had so many problems with that movie. Not to say that it wasn't well acted and well put together. Those are all great things, merits to the film. But if you don't have a story, if you don't have believable characters, you don't have a film. And that's the problem with the prequels. You don't have characters people can believe in. You don't have a film. Robots don't count.
We're some real pretty shit now, man.
Or go by Ripley.
We can unpack that on another episode.
Okay.
My unpopular
sounds like
opinion
an
that I can share just really quickly, and we don't even have to talk about it, but just to share it before we wrap, and then we'll get to Jamie's, is that no amount of beautiful artwork or audible dramas or novelizations or fan films can change the fact that William Gibson, despite being one of the great writers of our time, wrote an absolute shit script for Alien 3 twice.
Yep.
Twice! And the fucking second one was worse than the first one. And this is something that my very dear friend Aaron Percival, who actually was almost on the show, but his internet is still getting set up, but he'll come on to defend this at some point. He loves that script.
Aaron.
He thinks it is great. I totally respect Aaron so much intellectually and as a person. You are fucking wrong, Aaron, but I love you. I feel like the Gibson script... Listen, I read Neuromancer. I'm a huge Gibson fan. I completely understand his place in the pantheon of late 20th century artists and writers. I think Johnny Christmas is an incredibly gifted comic artist. I don't think his style necessarily fit an Alien title, but it would push it in a neat direction that I appreciated and I really enjoyed reading. I think that Tamara Bonvillain did a great job with the colors. I think that there were a lot of things going for that comic adaptation. I don't think the story fucking holds up at all. And I don't think it's anybody's fault. I just think it's a great thing that they moved away from that script 30 whatever years ago. and went to Vincent Ward, who made it weird again. I think that, Michael, you were mentioning the political aspects of it. I could tell that you weren't like 100% sold on it, because I'm not either. Like, I get that the ideas could potentially be interesting if they were handled deftly. You have these kind of proto-communists and these proto-capitalists in some kind of a battle, but it's like so on the nose and so kind of sophomoric and so obvious and so like simple. And William Gibson is not a simple writer, His yeah, go ahead.
Which all I'll say is that sometimes I feel like his heart wasn't totally in writing an Alien film.
Clearly,
I feel like they went to him and they were like, "Hey, we want something a little bit more highbrow. Like this is an Alien film. This is what we're going for." And he's like, "All right."
Exactly. And then there was a writer's strike in the middle of it, and then he was like, "Am I still doing this project? Like, who's paying me for this?" And it feels like that. It feels like fan service, but like through the lens of a really erudite high schooler or something. It just doesn't feel like a real script to me. And I feel like, we've had this Dirk Maggs thing on Audible, which I think is not very good. Apologies to him, because he's a great director, and I'm not taking anything away from the work that the cast did. It was amazing having Michael Biehn back and Lance Henriksen. I don't think the Audible drama is very good. I don't think the comics were that great, although, again, Johnny Christmas is a fucking brilliant artist. I think that it's just, we have all these great people trying to make this story work, and it just doesn't for me in a kind of a deep way. And I'm glad that we didn't get it made, because I think it would have actually been deleterious to the progression of this series as a whole.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it was going to be a two-parter too. There was going to be a fourth one as well. Right? Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. I'm happy with what we got.
Me too.
Comparison.
And I will say one other thing about just before that, and then Jamie, we can toss it off to you, and you can give us your unpopular opinion. We can close. One other thing I want to say, something that came up multiple times, like at least 3 or 4 times in this thread, was people had an unpopular opinion that they were happy that Hicks and Newt were killed off at the beginning of Alien 3, and I share that opinion. 100%, I share that opinion. Again, that is Vincent Ward. That was him making a spur-of-the-moment decision to put Ripley in a different emotional place and not have her carry the baggage of the previous film. And I think that was an artistic impulse that he responded to that was genuine and valid for the film, and it set up her ultimate redemptive arc, which is that the universe can take everything away from you. You can go through fucking 3 movies and have everything stripped all the way down to your femininity at the end by the end of the 3rd movie. She is just like a fucking avatar. She is nothing. Everything has been taken away, and she still has choice. She still has power in that moment, and that's what's heroic about Ripley, right? And that wouldn't be the case if she had a love interest, if she had a proto-child, if she had a family structure. That would not be as powerful. But she lost absolutely everything, and she did not lose her ability to take control of her death. And that is fucking profound, and I am so glad that we had a studio system set up in the early 90s that allowed that script to happen the way that it was finally somehow Frankenstein together, because it is an amazing artistic achievement and fucking batshit crazy. I'm really glad about it.
Amen, brother. So my unpopular opinion is that I don't think that Ridley Scott is a good director anymore. And I think what's happened, if you see his films, his earlier films up into the mid-90s, where he could take his time, his films, they just had a quiet pace about them. He had a more, my favorite word, cerebral quality to his filmmaking. His films within the last few years they're cranked out because he's a businessman now. He's almost like the head of a corporation, and his films reflect that. And I'm not saying he's worthless, he's whatever. I'm not saying any of those things, but I look at his films, and the one film that's been marginally good or entertaining, which was Matt Damon's The Martian. Yes. I thought that was really enjoyable. I thought visually it was boring as fuck. It was like the most boring visual. And it was like Ridley Scott was like, okay, I guess I could make this film. He didn't seem very interested in it. It was a script somebody offered him. It was sort of science fiction, but it wasn't science fiction. I'm not trying to shit on Ridley Scott. I respect what he's done. Kingdom of Heaven. I mean, we can all list films that he's made up into the mid 90s that are profound and amazing.
Because also right before Kingdom of Heaven, he had Black Hawk Down, he had Gladiator, he had really amazing triumphs artistically.
Hannibal was 2004. I think Hannibal was fantastic, and it had a lyrical quality to it that and a slowness, a methodical patience that his films do not have anymore. And he seems like someone who is sort of in it for the business and not for the art. Whereas before, in the beginning, he was in it for the art, not for the business. That's just, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but for me, my evidence is in the films that he's released. I think especially not so much Prometheus, but more Covenant, just because it just seemed like he didn't want to make the film. I could tell there wasn't much visual interest. There wasn't much interest in the xenomorphs themselves. He just seemed disinterested in his, like, oh yeah, they want me to make this movie with these aliens that I'm not interested in, but oh sure, this part. And some of the most engrossing moments in Covenant had surrounded David and Walter, for sure. That's where his heart is. In fact, he just finished Raised by Wolves, which was shot in Cape Town in South Africa, about a story about human children being raised by AI. And that's where his heart is right now. And I think the show might be amazing because that's where his heart is. His heart is not an alien anymore. He said it over and over and over. The aliens played out. It's done. It's done. It's done. And voila, Covenant.
You could hear it in the commentary. Like usually anything with Ridley Scott, I'm a huge Ridley Scott fan. Just listen to the commentary or the masterclass in Covenant. I'm like, Jesus Christ, he sounds completely interested. I mean, he's like, oh, like the most thing he was excited about was, I got the movie under 2 hours, just like the bosses wanted. Oh, Jesus Christ. Come on, man. This isn't why I worship you. I'm like, come on, dude. This isn't a factory. It's the Alien franchise. You helped birth. Like, come on, bro.
And he could do whatever he wants to, but
of course.
He's more concerned with budget. I mean, obviously that's a big concern for directors. Directors are given money by studios. They have to come in on budget or under budget, and
his
that's
heart
what he
is in
talks
AI.
about. That's what he talks about in his interviews. Yeah.
His heart is like, you could see it in Covenant when he talks about anything with AI. I think that's what he wants. I mean, as I have joked, he's like, I can't make Blade Runner 2049, so I'll put Blade Runner 2050 in an alien movie. You know, it's obviously I'm exaggerating, but it's he seems more into that. And like you said, I think that what he just produced is going to be good. He has no interest in the alien at all anymore.
Have you guys seen that latest commercial that I think it was a Chanel
commercial?
It was good.
It was good.
Oh, actually, I didn't like it at all, to be honest with you. It felt as disjointed and as incoherent as his films. And I just felt like even the effects were like obviously digital effects. Obviously, it didn't feel organic. And I wasn't trying to like shit on it. I was like, oh, whoa, a Ridley Scott commercial. And I watched it. I'm like, I was like, this just looks like something. He's like, yeah, I'll do a commercial, sure. And that's all the interest he had.
Remember, he basically rewrote the rules on how to make commercials in the 1980s.
Yep.
His company changed the way we think about commercial art. So Jamie, I agree with you. I think that but what's frustrating about this is that Ridley Scott is still there, and we see him in films that he makes. He's still there. The artist, the brilliant artist, is still there, but he's also being subsumed in a lot of cases by a studio. And knowing that he is a business model that has to function, and that he has like stakeholders that he has to appeal to, and that he's going to move on because he's running out of time, because his brothers are both dead. He's been through a lot of trauma in his life. He wants to finish his shit up, and he wants to do some things. And when he gets a chance to really nail it, like he does in the AI scenes in Covenant, like, I mean, you say he didn't want to make Covenant. I think what you're really saying, and if you are, I agree with you. I think he did want to make Covenant. He didn't want to have xenomorphs in it. I think that he had a film that he was really excited about, and then he kind of had that shoehorned in a little bit. I am okay with it because the rest of the movie that is non-xenomorphic in it is so strong to me that by the time the xenomorphs show up, I look at them as icing on the cake as opposed to being shoehorned into it. But I can totally see people thinking like, oh, this feels like a different film all of a sudden. That's totally valid. But then there's movies like The Counselor, okay? We don't talk about The Counselor on this podcast very much, although we probably should, because in a lot of ways, that is Ridley Scott outside of a studio. And that is a movie that is a fucking mess, and it is a really fascinating mess, okay? The Counselor came out. It is, for one thing, a Cormac McCarthy screenplay, which is in itself like an amazing thing to have on this planet. It stars like the biggest, most expensive talent of the early 2010s. And it came out right around the time of Prometheus. It is a completely interesting film that is absolutely terrible in some ways. In a lot of ways, it is terrible, but in a lot of ways, it is brilliant. And I think that The Counselor is a wonderful little microcosm into who Ridley Scott is right now in his filmmaking career, which is, I think, somewhat unmoored. And I think we see that in the art that's coming out. And I really feel like his brother's death, and this is again a huge generalization, but I feel like Tony's death was a shock to him, that he was like not going to be here forever and that he needed to kind of get moving on stuff. And I've seen this accelerative quality to the work that he's putting out, especially as a producer, because he's producing everything. And I have to say, you know, as much as the first season of The Terror is one of like the great achievements in television of the last 10 years to me, the second season is fucking garbage, and he's still producing it.
Yeah, it is.
It is fucking garbage, and I am so upset about that.
Really?
Because the
I haven't
first season
seen it
was
yet.
so good.
I was really had some high hopes for it just because of the subject matter.
It's terrible.
It is so bad,
terrible.
Dave, right? And this is Ridley Scott, right? He is still a brilliant artist, but there are other things in his head going on competing for that space, and sometimes those things are winning. And I don't think that started happening until maybe about 2010, 2011, Prometheus coming out, things started changing for him. His brother died shortly, right around that time. And I think that was a wake-up call to him, and I don't think that wake-up call was necessarily a good one.
Well, and I also, I think a really important thing to realize or to understand, at least in my understanding of not just directors, but artists in general. A lot of artists who are struggling, they have a lot to say. They have a lot to say. They have a lot to bring to the world, whether you're a musician or a composer or a painter or a writer. And oftentimes we're always working on that great big piece, that great big thing that we want to bring to the world. And sometimes
opus, right?
Yeah. And I think Ridley Scott was at a point in his life where his talent was so bright that he was given a platform to do it. And there was struggle and there was strife. Blade Runner, even Legend, and certainly Alien. There was struggle, there was difficulty, and masterpieces were born. I don't think Legend is a masterpiece, but it's certainly a very single film, very interesting film. However,
but it's good. Yeah.
But oftentimes these filmmakers who start aging, they become millionaires. They sort of said what they had to say. They don't. I feel like Ridley Scott, much like Ron Howard, they don't have anything to say anymore. Ron Howard's films have all been shit too. And they've been really well made. They've been really well put together. And this story's kind of and I just feel like that's where Ridley Scott is in his life, is he's said what he needed to say. And I don't want to cast him off. I'm done. You can go home now. You can retire. I'm not trying to say that either. But I think when you've lived a life where you're you have 6 different homes and you live in castles and you know your friends are the elite people, it's hard to connect with regular people anymore, and that certainly it reflects you in your art. And I feel like much like George Lucas when he made the prequels, he was a billionaire by that point, and he wrote these stories that had good bones, but no one could relate to.
I was just about to bring that up, that exact same thing. George Lucas is the perfect case study for this, right? Because he had THX 138, which was brilliant and crazy and subversive. He had American Graffiti, which was a masterpiece. He had A New Hope. And then, what the fuck happened to him, right? Something happened. And that is something that James Cameron has managed to elude, by the way. I think he still makes movies that are really fascinating, although there's not very many of them coming out. There's something that happens with directors, and I don't know if it's about, becoming out of touch with, the proletariat, although maybe that's part of it.
What does that mean? The
working, the normal people, those of us who aren't James Cameron or Ridley Scott, or George Lucas. But I think that part of it is, here's an idea, okay. There is a personality type that really flourishes when they are working with... I just saw the Rensler book in the background of somebody's video. Sorry. Mine's right near me too, don't worry about it. There's a personality type that really flourishes in the context of having artistic restrictions, okay? So, for example, when Ridley Scott was making The Duelist and when he was making Alien, and especially when he was making Blade Runner, he was not a fucking dictator. He was working really hard against a studio that was constantly saying to him, you have to prove that you can do this. You have to prove that you can justify getting another $2 million. You have to prove that we don't have to get in the way of you having this thematically inappropriate thing coming out in the movie because you think it's an artistically good choice, right? George Lucas, when he was making American Graffiti, was paying for that shit out of his pocket. That was as a USC student, right? He was working so hard to get that movie made. A lot of early directors who are brilliant flourish because they have something so desperately to prove to the world, and they will do anything to make it work. They will subsist on Hershey bars and fucking cocaine in a dorm room for weeks and come up with a sci-fi opus that will be legendary, right? But what happens when you don't have anything to prove? When you're just universally regarded as a genius and you don't have to do anything for anybody, you can make whatever movie you want to fucking make. And like Jamie, you and I know from having spoken with people at Fox who shall remain nameless, Ridley Scott basically gets his way. If he wants to do something, like, okay, he's going to get to do it. Like, we're not going to say you can't fucking make that movie, right? And that is what is happening now with him, is he is getting the ability to be lazy. It doesn't mean that he is lazy, because he's not. He's incredibly productive. But he can be when he wants to be. He doesn't have to prove himself anymore. And I think that's part of it, personally.
And you also have other directors. I would say, obviously, David Fincher is not the age of Ridley Scott. David Fincher's in his 50s. But David Fincher, he's not made, there's one arguably bad film that he's made in his Panic Room, which I don't like at all. It was very well made. It's just
that's a very well made movie.
It is very well made. It's funny. I was at a focus screening with David Fincher for that film. I ripped it to shreds too. But you have filmmakers who, like Terrence Malick and Fincher and other people who aren't these megalomaniacs or these megalomillionaires who can't get everything made, so they have to work in the system. You have, like, David Fincher was on World War Z Part 2 and it got canceled by the studio. If it was Ridley Scott, that movie wouldn't have been canceled because he's Ridley Scott. So you have people like him who are still struggling to get their movies made. Despite the fact that he's made Fight Club and all of those amazing films, he still has to struggle within the system to get his films made. That means he's got a lot more to say. He's got a lot more to prove. Like, George Lucas, who said he was going to sell Lucasfilm and go off and make experimental films, and he hasn't done shit. Probably because he's still butthurt over the backlash from the prequels, to be honest with you. And that's a lot of criticism to get over. I don't think that. I think it's almost like success has made a failure of our homes. That famous quote. And oftentimes you blow your load on the first few films. You get all this money, you get all this acclaim, you get all this power, you can do whatever you want, and then you don't really have much to say, and it comes through in your films. And I think that's where Ridley Scott is. It's not that, you're right, Patrick, all of those things are still in him. I just think his creative priorities are elsewhere. They're more attuned to the business as they are to the actual art. However, I think the litmus test will be Raised by Wolves. Because he's so involved and he's directed quite a few of the episodes, and he's been involved with that show from the beginning, in terms of being a producer, being a director, being jerk off, all of those things. It could be some of the best thing he's done in a long, long time, because that's where his heart is. So yeah, I mean, it's also unfortunate, and at the same time, people change. Like I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I do all of those things, and my work in 15 years might not be as good as my work now. It's possible, It is
possible, but it is specifically a director's conundrum. And you bring up Terrence Malick, who I know is one of your favorites. He's also one of my favorite directors of all time. But I want to point him out as one final case study as we close, right? So he had this huge hit, which is kind of uncharacteristic for him, in The Tree of Life, right? Before that, he had The New World, which was kind of like a what the fuck movie. That movie's amazing. It is a brilliant movie, but the box office did not agree with that, and people in general, of course. Yeah, right. And it was just a movie that kind of landed with a thud, and it's since been reevaluated as much more than we kind of thought it was when it came out. But before that, he had The Thin Red Line, which was another one of these. It's a fucking masterpiece, and I am not saying it's not a masterpiece.
And that was his first return in films in
for
15
20 years or something.
Yeah,
right?
maybe 20. Yeah.
And then there's like a decade almost that goes by. He has The New World, and then like another almost decade goes by, and he has The Tree of Life. And The Tree of Life gets a lot of press because it's like his return. And I think The Tree of Life is one of the great films of our era. I completely feel like that is a masterpiece. And then what happens? He makes, and I pulled it up here, he makes To the Wonder the next year, bad movie. He makes Knight of Cups 3 years later, bad movie. He makes Voyage of Time for IMAX, which doesn't count. Song to Song, which I haven't seen yet. And now he has another one coming out, Hidden Life. So in the last 4 years, he's had 4 movies coming out, right? This is what happens. These directors finally get to a place where they're treated as the geniuses that they are. And they are. They are brilliant people, these people we're talking about.
And no one's saying no to them.
And nobody says no. People say, hey, you know what? You made money, you made art, fucking do whatever you want. And when they do what they want, it doesn't actually work that well because they had to have something to prove.
Yeah, I think saying no is a good thing. Like, I think being surrounded by people who can say, or a studio that says, yeah, we think you should work on this a little bit. And I think Ridley Scott was within those confines with Covenant, to be honest with you. He was working for a studio that was saying, this is what we want to see. And so his reaction to that was to, and this sort of gets to some of the issue that I have with the aliens in Covenant. It wasn't so much their presence, it's just a lack of reverence for them. And Alien and Alien 3 and in Aliens, there's some reverence for these creatures. In Covenant, there's no reverence. You go into alien mode, like alien visual mode at a certain point on the ship, it's like, you don't give a shit about these things.
No.
They're just these. And that was to me like, okay, I can live with everything else. You bring an alien, and even the backburster, which is an incredible scene, that was reverent. That was hollowed ground. That was a scene that's like, going to be in the history books for one of the most brutal scenes I've ever seen in my life. And it was treated with those like holy gloves, and then the rest wasn't, unfortunately.
And as somebody who always defends Covenant on the show, I will say I defend it with this internal mythos that I formed that says that was a protomorph and not the final xenomorph, and that's why it didn't get the reverence that it deserved in the end of that movie. That is my way of coping with that and loving that movie the way that I love it, is that is not actually Big Chap, right? So if that's proven wrong, so, Dave, you were mentioning before, like, maybe we don't need another movie, maybe we can have a book, we can have a tie-in, we can kind of like wrap this prequel trilogy up. I'm okay with that because I don't necessarily want the xenomorph in Alien, who is my favorite villain, quote unquote, in any film ever made, other than Roy Batty, to be, I don't want it to be treated with that lack of respect. So I've made this personal decision to treat it like it's a different creature altogether. Jamie, I totally agree with you on that. And I think that this has been a wonderful discussion, and we can wrap. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who participated in this thread on Building Better Worlds. If you're not already in the group, please join up. There is so much going on there. We kind of had this epiphany a few weeks ago where we were like, you know what? People really, even though there's not much going on outside of the expanded universe right now, people really want to talk and connect. So, let's just get out there and start talking to people. And as you can see, it's resulting in actual episodes like this. We had an episode planned for tonight on pre-production, which you'll hear soon. We decided to not do that episode because this thread was so fun in Building Better Worlds. It totally changed the course of this show. So, you guys in Building Better Worlds are actually dictating the trajectory of this
chicken shit outfit.
And it is a huge honor to be able to talk about what you guys are talking about and to unpack it together with great friends, late at night, 2 beers deep into what has been a really fun conversation. So, thank you guys personally.
Yes, thank you. And check out xenomorphing.com to see more of what Dave has to say. And Michael, where can people find your work?
michaelskidiri.com.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being on. An hour and 40 minutes later.
Yeah.
Good episode. I knew awesome. It would be this long.
And we could do this all night. And don't forget, Ash, the fan fiction comic is dropping any day now from Michael, so be on the lookout for that. The artwork looks fucking crazy good. The story seems super fascinating. It's got a lot of buzz around it in the fan community, so stay tuned. Michael's got this coming out, and 100% pick it up.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Thanks.
Bye.
Later.
For more on Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please visit perfectorganism.com. Perfect Organism is available for listen or download through Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, and Spotify. If you'd like to support the show, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. Thank you.
Game over!